Have you ever stopped to truly think about where our everyday words come from?
Hmm.
How a sound or, a concept, even a simple gesture, can morph over centuries
Oh,
into something entirely different,
yeah, completely different.
carrying with it these echoes of forgotten times, ancient beliefs, and sometimes, well, just quirky, unexpected facts.
It really is like digging into the past, isn't it? Linguistically speaking.
Exactly, like linguistic archaeology. Every layer you uncover reveals something new, often pretty astonishing.
Hmm.
We use words all day, every day, right?
Hmm.
Often without a second thought about the incredible journeys they've taken to get to us.
We really do take them for granted.
But each one has a story, a history. And that history can illuminate so much about, well, the human experience across huge stretches of time.
It truly is a fascinating field. And today, we're taking a deep dive into a really rich stack of your sources.
Yeah, quite the treasure trove this time.
It really is a treasure trove of linguistic history to explore the surprising, the unexpected, and sometimes, let's be honest, the deeply humorous origins of words that all start with the letter P.
Ah, the P's. Gonna be fun.
Definitely. We'll discover how fundamental human concepts like movement or pain and tangible objects and even profound cultural shifts are just, well, embedded in the very language we use daily.
Right.
And what's so striking here is how words aren't static labels, are they? They're living, breathing things
Absolutely. Constantly evolving, shifting.
and reflecting our changing world, almost like a mirror to our collective human story, really.
That's precisely right. And our mission today is to give you that shortcut, that way to being well-informed about these lexical journeys.
So you can sound smart at parties.
Well, yes, impress your friends at your next gathering, sure. But maybe more importantly, gain a far richer appreciation for this invisible architecture of language all around us.
Hmm.
So get ready for some serious aha moments, because we're about to explore how, like an ancient Greek god gave us the feeling of panic,
That's a great one.
and what a penthouse used to be,
Yeah.
its humble beginnings before it became the symbol of luxury,
Quite the journey for that word.
and why a pedestrian once referred to a style of writing, believe it or not just someone walking.
It's true. It's a wild, enlightening ride through the history of language, really. It might fundamentally change the way you think about just talking.
Yeah, speaking and understanding.
And we'll also delve into how ancient ideas of pain as like punishment still resonate in our vocabulary today,
Yeah.
and how the pursuit of peace has evolved through its linguistic history, and how something as simple as an apple or, a feather can give rise to a whole cascade of related yet surprisingly diverse terms.
It's all connected.
It really makes you ponder, doesn't it?
What can these seemingly small changes in words tell us about the bigger shifts in culture, technology, thought over hundreds, thousands of years?
Right, these microhistories of words. They reflect the macro history. They really do. They give us this unique lens to view the grand tapestry of human civilization.
Okay, let's kick off our deep dive then. Let's start with words that convey movement, change, or measurement. These kind of dynamic concepts and how their meanings have really shifted over time.
Makes sense. Where better to start?
And it seems only right to begin with a word that is all about movement itself, pace. The speed something moves, the steps you take.
Seems straightforward enough.
But its origin tells a much more, well, fundamental story than just putting one foot in front of the other.
Indeed. To really get pace, you have to go back, way back to its Latin roots.
Okay.
So the word came into Middle English, but before that, it was in Old French as pas. And that came directly from the Latin word passus.
Passus, okay.
Now, passus wasn't just any old step. It literally meant a stretch of the leg.
A stretch of the leg, like literally stretching it out.
Exactly. Derived from the Latin verb pondere, which means to stretch. So at its very core, pace was about that physical extension of the body, a single stride, a basic unit of movement.
Wow. Okay, so it started as this incredibly literal thing of physical action. But it didn't stay that narrow, did it?
No, not at all.
Our sources say that beyond just stepping, pace broadened pretty quickly in early usage to also mean journey or even a route.
Right. Think about that jump from one leg movement to an entire expedition.
Yeah. And this is where the meaning really starts to deepen, especially with the figurative uses like the phrase put through one's paces. That sounds familiar.
Very familiar. It popped up in the mid-18th century, and its original context is quite specific.
Okay.
Initially put through one's paces was a horse riding term.
Ah, makes sense.
Yeah, making a horse show, its different gaits, walk, trot, canter, gallop, basically, to see how well it performed, how well it was trained.
Yeah.
A literal test of its physical abilities.
Testing its steps, its paces.
Precisely. It wasn't until about a century later, mid-19th century, that the phrase kind of jumped the fence, figuratively speaking.
Right.
It started being used more broadly, meaning to thoroughly test someone's abilities, their skills, or even how well a new system works.
So connecting this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it really shows how this concrete action, a horse's gait, becomes a metaphor, right? For managing energy or controlling rhythm in a story.
It really does. And it makes you think how many of our modern strategic phrases, hitting your stride or one step at a time, are rooted in these super simple, ancient physical acts.
It feels like a lot of them, probably. It shows a basic level of how we think.
Absolutely.
And pace kept evolving. The whole idea of tempo or rhythm, like when we talk about a change of pace in a novel or in music, it's actually pretty recent, linguistically.
Really? When did that come about?
Only emerged in the 1950s, according to our sources. Before that, you wouldn't really use pace like that for artistic rhythm.
Huh.
And then, from the 1970s, we got the phrase pace oneself. Controlling your actions or energy to avoid getting too tired.
Yeah, that's everywhere now.
It really is. It's amazing how a word about a single physical movement now covers everything from endurance and strategy to storytelling rhythm.
It really highlights language's ability to abstract things, doesn't it?
Totally. And this core idea of movement from pace, it just ripples outwards, doesn't it? It affects several other really common P words. Shows how connected everything is.
It does. Take the verb pass, for example, as in to go by something or go past it.
Okay.
It comes directly from the Old French passer, which is based on that very same Latin root, passus, pass.
So passing is linked to pacing. Makes sense.
Inherently linked, the act of moving forward, stepping.
And then the noun pass, like a mountain pass, is that related to?
It is. Our sources say it's actually a variant of pace, but it was influenced by the verb pass and the French noun pas.
So a pass is literally a way to pass through something. A path.
Exactly. And this gives us idioms like reach a pretty pass, mid-19th century phrase.
Which means things are bad, right? Not pretty.
Counterintuitively, yes. It means you've arrived at a difficult, maybe unfortunate situation, a point where it's hard to pass easily.
Okay, got it. And what about make a pass at someone?
Ah, yes. That's more colloquial, dates from the 1920s. It implies trying to approach someone, often romantically, a figurative move forward towards them.
Another kind of passing.
In a way, yes.
Huh.
And from the same rich root, we get passable.
Passable, like, it'll do.
Well, originally, it was much more literal. From Old French, it meant able to be passed in late Middle English.
Like a road you could travel on.
Precisely. If a road was passable, you could go through. But then, by the late 15th century, its meaning shifted subtly, but importantly.
To mean.
Adequate or tolerable, like passable quality or a passable performance.
Ah, so it's not great, but it's good enough to pass.
Exactly. It moved from a literal physical ability to a judgment of sufficiency. Acceptable enough?
Moving right along this path, then, we hit passage, like a hallway or a bit of text.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Comes directly from Old French, also based on Latin passus. That sense of moving through or a section allowing movement is ancient.
And we get phrases like of passage.
Meaning passing through or
Yeah.
itinerant. Yeah. Recorded from the late 17th century, which leads us straight to the bird of passage.
Migratory birds.
Early 18th century idiom for them, yes. And by extension, anyone who travels a lot or doesn't stay put captures that idea of transit perfectly.
And related to passage.
Passenger.
Makes sense, right? Comes from the Old French adjective passenger, simply meaning passing.
Okay.
Then you add the suffix, which means the person who does the thing, like an harbinger or messenger. That happened in late Middle English.
So a passenger is literally someone who is doing the passing through, a traveler.
Exactly, a transient.
And finally, in this movement group, you mentioned a really fascinating one, passport.
Ah, yes, the passport. Seems so modern, tied to international travel and ID.
But it's older, dates from the late 15th century. And its first meaning was authorization to depart from a port.
Depart from a port.
Okay. It comes from the French passport, which literally translates as passport.
Pass. Port, wow, that's direct.
Incredibly direct. Permission to pass a port. And it's amazing how it's kept that core meaning for centuries, despite massive changes in travel.
So what's the takeaway here for us? What does all this mean?
Well, it seems that from just taking a single step, passus, to crossing mountains, getting permission, defining a whole journey.
These P words really show how fundamental movement is to our language, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They're constantly shaping new meanings, adapting to new contexts. It shows language isn't static, it's dynamic, it's living, a reflection of how we interact with the world.
A constant journey, like the words themselves.
And it really speaks to how our physical existence, just moving around, shapes our abstract thoughts and how we talk about them. The most basic acts become building blocks for complex ideas.
Okay, let's shift gears. Now, for some words whose histories are just unexpected, way out there from their modern use.
The quirky ones. These are often the most fun.
These are the ones that make you stop and go, wait, that's where it came from. Get ready to have your assumptions challenged.
Indeed. Prepare for some genuine surprises. Let's kick off with panic.
Panic, okay. Sudden, overwhelming fear, anxiety, feels very modern sometimes.
Right, but its origin is rooted deep in ancient mythology. It links directly to a specific, rather mischievous Greek god,
A god. Which one?
Pan. The word panic came to English early 17th century via French panique, then Latin panicus, all from the Greek panikos.
Meaning of Pan.
Exactly. Derived directly from his name, Pan, the woodland god.
So what did Pan have to do with fear?
Legend had it that those sudden weird noises you hear in the woods,
Yeah, like rustling leaves, snapping twigs.
eerie echoes, sudden cries, they were attributed to him. He was thought to cause terror in people who heard them, often playfully, sometimes menacingly, and often with no visible source for the sound.
So to panic was literally to feel a fear that was caused by Pan. A primal, maybe irrational terror.
Precisely. And what's really profound here is how our language today is still rooted in these ancient attempts to explain the unexplainable, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Panic isn't just a word, it's like a linguistic fossil. From a time when that rustling, that chill down your spine was blamed on a god,
Before psychology had names for it all.
long before. Humans used myth and folklore to make sense of their internal states and the world around them. And those explanations are still woven into how we talk about intense emotions.
Our emotional vocabulary is like an inheritance from how our ancestors saw the world.
It really is, not just a modern invention.
Speaking of ancient beliefs shaping words,
Mhm.
let's talk pagan. We often link it to polytheism, nature worship,
Right. Non-Christian faiths, generally.
but its origin is surprisingly mundane, almost boring.
It's certainly humble. Pagan came into late Middle English from the Latin paganus, and paganus just meant villager or rustic.
A villager.
Yeah. From pagus, meaning country district, just a geographical or social term. But here's the twist.
Okay.
Latin paganus also meant civilian. And as Christianity spread, Christian Latin speakers started using it differently.
How so?
It shifted to mean heathen, literally, one not enrolled in the army of Christ.
Whoa! So if you weren't in God's army, you were just a civilian, a pagan.
Essentially, yes, it went from a neutral geographical term to a potent religious label, often used negatively, marking those outside the dominant faith.
That's a huge shift. From the country dweller to the unbeliever.
Massive, all based on that civilian versus soldier of Christ idea.
Okay, let's jump way forward in time now. From ancient Rome to the swinging 60s with paparazzi.
Ah, yes. A much more recent arrival in English really only became common from the 1960s onwards,
And it comes from,
directly from Italian. But what's really remarkable is the specific source.
go on,
It comes from the name of a character in Federico Fellini's iconic film La Dolce Vita from 1960.
a movie character named Paparazzo.
That's the one, Paparazzo. He was this persistent, intrusive photographer, always chasing celebrities with his flashbulb.
And that one character's name just exploded to define the whole profession.
Instantly, a global phenomenon, born from a single movie. It became the word for that kind of aggressive celebrity photography.
That's honestly astonishing. The speed and power of pop culture on language.
Isn't it? Shows how quickly a new concept or social thing can get named and spread through media almost overnight.
Now, for one you said was a favorite, petard. Sounds vaguely explosive,
It was explosive. You mainly hear it in that Shakespeare phrase, hoist with one's own petard.
meaning your own plan blows up in your face.
Exactly. But do you know what a petard actually was? And, crucially, where its name comes from?
I'm guessing it's weird.
Oh, it's wonderfully weird. So mid-16th century, a petard was a small bomb, bell-shaped, often, metal or wood box full of powder, used to blow down doors or walls in sieges.
Okay, sounds serious. Explosive.
It was, but its origin, get this, is from the French word petard, which comes from péter, meaning to break wind.
You're kidding. To fart.
Not kidding. The bomb was named after a fart, presumably because of the noise or the sudden expulsion of gas.
Hoist with one's own petard literally has a gassy origin.
It absolutely does. Who knew that famous Hamlet quote about plans backfiring disastrously came from such a basic source? Hoist means lifted and removed, so you're blown sky high by your own well.
Fart bomb. Amazing.
It really underscores how literal, even crude, origins can become highly metaphorical and totally lose their original, maybe vulgar meaning over time.
Linguistic alchemy indeed. Transforming the base into the profound.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, speaking of things not being what they seem, let's tackle a popular myth. The word posh.
Ah, yes. The port out, starboard home story.
Everyone seems to know that one.
Huh.
The cooler side of the ship for travel between England and India. POSH.
It's a great story, very evocative, very posh, in fact, but
Yikes.
it's almost certainly not true. There's no real historical evidence to support it.
So where does posh likely come from? It's the early 20th century.
It is. The exact origin is a bit debated, but the most likely source is probably from an older slang word, posh, meaning money, or perhaps from the Romani word posh karuna, meaning half a crown, or maybe even just related to the slang dandy, something stylish, flashy, perhaps money-related.
But definitely not boat tickets.
Almost certainly not boat tickets. It's a classic folk etymology, a story that sounds good and catches on, but doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
Well, it's always satisfying to debunk one of those.
Yeah.
So next time someone mentions the boat tickets, you can gently correct them.
Be the linguistic hero, armed with facts.
Okay, moving to something more comfortable. Pajamas. We all wear them, or something like them. Where did they come from?
Well, they have a surprisingly global origin, reflecting a lot of cross-cultural exchange.
Sounds intriguing.
The word pajamas came into English in the early 19th century directly from Urdu and Persian.
Urdu and Persian. Okay.
It's a compound. Pe, meaning leg, and jama, meaning clothing, so literally leg clothing.
Leg clothing.
Yeah.
Simple enough. What were they originally?
Originally, they were loose, lightweight trousers, often silk or cotton, worn by both men and women in places like Turkey, Iran, and India, for day wear, actually.
Not just for sleeping.
Not initially. It was Europeans living or working in those countries, especially colonial officials and the like, who adopted them. First for comfort in the heat during the day, but then they really caught on as nightwear because they were so comfortable.
Ah, and then they brought the fashion back home.
Exactly. The term and the garment gradually spread outside Asia, eventually becoming the standard sleepwear or loungewear we know across the Western world.
From leg clothing in India to global bedtime staple.
It's quite the journey.
And for our final quirky origin in this segment, the majestic pyramid.
Yeah.
Instantly makes you think of Egypt, right? Huge stone structures.
Absolutely. Colossal engineering feats. Seems like a word that must have a grand origin.
Well, maybe not that grand. Or perhaps grand in a different way. It came into English in late Middle English, first used in the geometrical sense, the shape, via Latin from Greek paramus, pyramid.
Okay, seems straightforward so far.
But here's the twist, the surprising alternative origin that some etymologists love. The Greek word paramus also denoted a type of cake.
A cake. Like a birthday cake.
Well, maybe not birthday cake, but a specific type, often made of wheat flour and honey. And some linguists strongly believe the cake sense was actually the earlier one.
You're saying the giant stone structures might be named after a cake?
That's the theory, that the iconic geometrical shape was named later because it resembled that specific cake, which might have been conical or pyramid-shaped itself.
Wow. That's delightful, actually. A towering ancient wonder possibly sharing a name with a simple cake.
It offers a real insight, doesn't it,
Mm.
into how early languages worked, naming complex or new things by comparing them to familiar everyday objects.
Makes perfect sense. How else would you describe a massive triangular structure to someone who's never seen one?
You know that pointy cake we like? It's like a giant one of those.
Exactly. It shows that fundamental cognitive process. We name the unknown by relating it to the known. Ingenious, practical, and in this case, potentially delicious. A testament to the ingenuity of early human communication. Abstract, rooted in the concrete, even the edible.
Okay, let's dive into the human side of things now.
Yeah.
Our language is so deeply tied up with our experiences, emotions, bodies, how we structure society.
Absolutely. Words that reveal these intimate connections.
Let's start with something universal, yet with that surprising historical twist we hinted at earlier, pain.
Right, pain. In Middle English, its early meaning wasn't quite what we think of first today. It was more like Suffering inflicted as punishment for an offense.
Punishment, not just ouch.
Less ouch, more retribution. It came from Old French pine, ultimately from Latin poena, and poena originally meant penalty or punishment. Only later did it evolve to mean the physical or emotional sensation we call pain.
So legal punishment came before physical sensation in the word's history. That's a major shift.
It really is, and you still see echoes of that original legal meaning, right, in phrases like pains and penalties.
Yeah, you hear that in legal dramas. Dates from the mid-16th century, apparently.
Still kicking around in legal contexts, but then it got much more colloquial, less formal, like pain in the neck.
Ah, yes, that's from the 1920s.
Around then, yeah. It's a direct but humorous extension of the meaning, from something formally inflicted to just something annoying or troublesome.
Shows language moving from the serious to the everyday complaint.
Exactly. And what's illuminating is that whole evolution, from legal retribution to personal physical feeling, then to a casual expression of annoyance.
It shows our understanding of suffering has broadened, maybe become more humanized.
I think so. It shifts from an external thing imposed on you to an internal subjective feeling, and then even to a lighthearted gripe. It makes you ask, how do our words track these shifts in societal views on justice, punishment, empathy?
Language as a mirror to our moral development.
Precisely.
Okay, following pain, let's look at passion. Today we think intense enthusiasm, deep love for something.
Yeah, passion for music, passion project, romantic passion.
But its roots are, well, surprisingly, steeped in suffering, deep suffering.
Like pain, it came into Middle English from Old French, then late Latin passio. And this Latin word was mainly a term in Christian theology.
Theology, how so?
It derived directly from the Latin verb pati, meaning to suffer or to endure.
Ah, so the passion.
Refers specifically to the suffering, crucifixion, and death of Jesus Christ. It was a very specific, solemn, agonizing meaning originally.
Wow. So how did we get from that to passion for Baroque music?
It took time. Our sources say that modern sense of great enthusiasm or intense feeling didn't really emerge until the early 17th century.
And the adjective passionate.
In late Middle English, it could mean both easily moved to strong emotion and enraged or even full of suffering. Came from medieval Latin passionatus.
So it kept the intensity, but the positive and negative spin shifted dramatically, from agony to artistic fervor.
Quite the leap, isn't it? Shows how a word's core intensity can hair on, even as its connotations change completely.
Now, for a word with a rather colorful, maybe even scandalous, literary origin, pander.
Yes. Pander often has negative vibes today, right? Indulging someone's lower desires, catering to base instincts.
Often for personal gain, yeah. So where did that come from?
Well, in late Middle English, it started as a noun, and it comes directly from pander.
Pander. A person.
A character, yes.
Yeah.
From Geoffrey Chaucer's epic poem Troilus and Cresside, written late 14th century.
Okay, what did pander do?
This character, Pandarus, acted as a go-between, kind of an unscrupulous facilitator for the illicit romance between Troilus, a Trojan prince, and Cresside.
So he enabled their affair.
Pretty much. And that role, the facilitator of forbidden love, actually originated even earlier with the 14th century Italian writer Boccaccio. He created the character first.
And then the verb to pander came later.
Early 17th century, famously used by Shakespeare in Hamlet. Since lust itself as actively doth burn as reason panders will, reason indulging or enabling lust's desires.
That's incredible. A specific literary character gives us a word for indulging lower desires or exploiting weaknesses.
Isn't it? A powerful example of how fiction, even a character from a centuries-old poem, can deeply impact our moral vocabulary. Gives us a single word for a complex ethical issue.
The lasting power of storytelling on language.
Absolutely.
Okay, next up, partner. Seems super straightforward, common, but its history reflects changing relationships, right?
It subtly does, yes. In business, in personal life. It entered Middle English as an alteration of an older word, parsoner.
Parsoner. Never heard of it.
Meant partner or joint heir. Came from Anglo-Norman French parsoner, based on Latin partitio, meaning partition or division.
Division. Interesting.
Yeah, and the change from parsoner to partner happened because of the strong association with the word part, emphasizing shared portions, common interests. That idea of sharing or dividing is key.
And how it's used has changed too, reflecting society.
Massively. Using partner for a spouse dates from the early 17th century, implying a legal or formal shared role. But it wasn't until the late 20th century, really towards the end, that it became common for each person in an unmarried couple sharing a home.
Right, reflecting changes in marriage norms, cohabitation.
Exactly. Often used for same-sex couples or those choosing not to marry. It adapted to new social realities.
And what about partner in crime?
Ah, that one's older. Early 19th century. Implies collaboration in mischief, maybe something illicit. Shows its versatility.
Okay, how about party? Feels like it went from division to fun.
That's a great way to put it. Quite an optimistic journey for a word. In Middle English, its early use was quite different, more confrontational.
How so?
It referred to a body of people united in opposition to others, specifically a political group or faction.
Ah, like a political party. Makes sense.
Comes from Old French party, based on Latin partire, divide into parts. So its core meaning was about division, separation, taking parts or sides.
But now we think of cake and balloons.
Right. That transformation from a divided political faction to a joyful social gathering is remarkable. The social gathering sense only dates from the early 18th century. Centuries later.
It really highlights how words can soften, broaden their meaning over time, reflecting maybe a shift from conflict to social connection.
Or at least the desire for social connection and fun speaks volumes about wanting to come together, not just be divided into parties.
And a simple word, but with lots of meanings, especially around affection. Pet.
Pet. Yeah, it emerged early 16th century, originally Scots and Northern English for a tame animal kept in the house, something cherished.
Where did it come from?
Surprisingly, its origin is unknown for such a common word. Some guess it's linked to petit or petite, implying something small and dear.
Interesting. But it expanded beyond animals, didn't it?
It did. Started being used as a term of endearment for people from the mid-19th century. My little pet.
And teacher's pet.
About half a century later, yeah.
Right.
That familiar, sometimes slightly critical phrase for the favored student.
And the verb to pet. Stroking an animal.
Recorded from the early 17th century, meaning to stroke affectionately or treat with special fondness. And then, as our sources note, more specific sexual connotations popped up from the 1920s, especially in the U.S.
So from loyal animal to term of endearment to favored one to something more intimate. That little word had quite a life.
A very busy social evolution, reflecting changing attitudes to affection and intimacy.
Finally, in this section, puerile. We use it negatively now, right? Childish, immature.
Almost always pejoratively, yes, but its origin was far more neutral.
Really?
Dates from the late 16th century. Early meaning was simply like a boy or characteristic of a child. Came directly from French puerile or Latin puerilis, from puer, the Latin word for boy.
So it was just descriptive initially, like boyish.
Exactly, neutral. But then it took that negative turn. The depreciative sense, meaning childish or immature in a critical way, arose late 17th century.
So it went from describing boyhood to criticizing a lack of maturity in adults.
Right, reflects a shift in societal expectations about growing up, perhaps. Judging behavior seen as immature.
Highlights what we expect from adults versus children.
And just quickly before we move on, peace. Its journey is maybe less dramatic, but tells us something fundamental.
Okay.
It traces back to Latin pax, which didn't just mean tranquility, it meant pact, agreement.
Ah, so peace was an arrangement.
At its core, yes, an absence of conflict achieved through negotiation. It emphasizes peace isn't just a passive state, but often an active creation through human agreement. Not just the absence of war, but the presence of a deal.
That's a powerful distinction. Okay, let's transition again. Now to words describing objects, structures, places, purpose.
How our living spaces and tools shape our language.
Exactly, starting with the humble pantry. Seems simple storage for food.
Right. Dry goods, cans, kitchen stuff. But its original purpose, rooted in its name, was incredibly specific, almost obsessed with one thing.
What was it?
Bread. In Middle English, pantry came from Anglo-Norman French pantry, from pannet or baker, all based on late Latin panarius, bread cellar or bread basket, from panis Latin for bread.
So a pantry was literally a bread room.
Precisely, a room in the house specifically for keeping bread. Its entire function was storing that absolute staple.
Wow, that feels so specific now.
Doesn't it? It highlights how specialized functions create specific words, and then those words broaden as habits change. A room just for bread seems quaint now, with fridges and diverse diets.
But back then, bread was so crucial it needed its own space and name.
Fundamental. Shows how language adapts to even small changes in domestic life, farming, what we eat.
Okay, now for that linguistic rags to riches story. penthouse.
Hmm.
Today, luxury views exclusivity.
The height of urban opulence, right?
But Middle English,
Yeah.
it was spelled pentus and meant something totally different.
Couldn't be more different. It meant an outhouse built onto the side of a building.
An outhouse, like a shed, a lean-to.
Exactly. A humble attached structure, maybe just an overhang, nothing luxurious about it. Its etymology is from Old French appentus, based on late Latin appendicium, appendage. From Latin appendere, to hang on.
So it was literally just something hanging on the side of a building. An appendage.
That's the root. So how did it go from that to a luxury apartment with a view?
That's the million-dollar question. It's maybe the biggest real estate upgrade a word has ever had.
Has to be. The sources say the big change in form and meaning happened in the 16th century. Through folk etymology, basically. People reinterpreted it.
Yeah.
The first syllable, pont, got associated with the French word pont, meaning slope, maybe thinking of a sloping roof. And the second syllable, isomelados, got associated with the English word house.
So pentus became penthouse in people's minds, associating it with a house, maybe one on a slope or with a sloping roof.
Something like that. This linguistic makeover completely changed its status, from humble outbuilding to aspirational living. Sound and association transformed it.
Wow. Folk etymology giving a word a luxury upgrade.
A fantastic example of how popular, even if inaccurate, associations can redefine a word's image and value. Next up, palate. Interesting because there are two distinct words spelled the same.
Right. Homonyms. Two separate origins. What are they?
Okay, palate one is the simple mattress, often crude.
The straw bed type thing.
Exactly. Middle English, from Anglo-Norman French paillet, from pale straw, ultimately from Latin palea, also straw, so literally a straw bed. Related to pallias, another word for a straw mattress. Very humble.
Okay, that's pallet one. What's pallet two?
Pallet two is the one we see in warehouses, the platform for goods.
Right, the wooden thing forklifts move around.
That one. It also emerged in late Middle English, but first meaning a flat wooden blade with a handle, used by artists for mixing paints or by plasterers.
Like an artist's palette. Spelled differently, though.
Similar origin, though, from French palette, little blade, from Latin pala, spade or shovel. So fundamentally a flat tool.
So how did it become the warehouse platform?
That happened much later, early 20th century. The word adapted to mean that small, low wooden platform for moving goods with a forklift.
So two totally separate journeys for PALAT. Though the blade to platform one has a kind of logic, a flat surface.
It does show a subtle continuity of flatness, doesn't it? Even across centuries and uses.
Okay, from flat surfaces to supporting structures.
Pillar.
Pillar came into Middle English from Anglo-Norman French pilar, based on Latin pila, pillar, or pier. Its literal meaning as a structural column is ancient and hasn't changed much.
But it got used figuratively quite early.
Very early. The idea of a person being a main supporter or foundation came quickly. Phrases like pillar of society or pillar of the community.
Those feel more recent, maybe.
The modern usage really solidified around the 1960s, yeah, referring to someone who's a strong, essential support for a group or institution, just like a physical pillar holds up a roof.
Makes sense. And from supporting structures to flat ones used for less pleasant things. Plank and walk the plank. Right. Plank is Middle English, from Old Northern French plank, ultimately late Latin planca, just meaning board or flat piece of wood.
And the phrase walk the plank, pretty literal, unfortunately.
Extremely literal. The method of execution associated with pirates forcing someone off a board extending over the ship's side into the water. A direct, brutal use of the object.
Grim. Okay, lastly in this section, the pulpit. We think church sermons, right?
Almost exclusively today, yes. The raised platform for preaching. But its origin was much more secular.
Says Ditzler, how?
It originated in Middle English from Latin pulpitum, which meant scaffold or platform quite broadly.
Like a stage.
Exactly. An early sense in English, now obsolete, was just that. Platforms for public performances, discussions, debates. In ancient Rome, they weren't specifically religious.
So when did it become religious?
In medieval Latin, the meaning of pulpitum started to narrow towards preacher's stand. And then in the early 17th century, the strong connection with sermons and religious address really took hold in English, solidified its sacred meaning. So it went from a general public stage to a specifically sacred space. It beautifully encapsulates that shift, doesn't it? Where authoritative speech primarily happened, moved from public squares and theaters to the church. Reflects a change in the location of moral authority, perhaps?
Language loves its building blocks, doesn't it? Prefixes are like these super powerful Legos.
They really are semantic multipliers, transforming meanings sometimes dramatically just by adding a few letters at the start.
Let's look at two really common ones, para and pro, how they alter meanings and connect words that seem totally unrelated.
Yes, these are great examples. Let's start with para. It's particularly interesting because it actually has two completely different origins, leading to different meanings, even though they look identical.
Two for one. How does that work?
Well, para 1 comes straight from Greek para, meaning beside or alongside.
Okay, beside.
Like parathyroid glands located beside the thyroid, or parataxes in linguistics clauses arranged side by side. That's one sense. Beside, adjacent.
Got it. And the other sense from Greek para.
Beyond. Distinct from but analogous to, implying something similar but outside the official structure. Think paramilitary forces operating beside or distinct from the regular military. Or a paramedic providing care alongside or beyond the traditional doctor.
So proximity or a similar but different relationship. That's para number one from Greek. What's number two?
Para 2 comes from a totally different route, French, which borrowed it from Italian parere, a verb meaning to defend or to shield.
Ah, so this one means protecting from.
Exactly. Protecting from or defending against, a completely different core idea from the Greek one, despite the identical spelling.
Okay, let's see some examples. For para one, the beside or beyond one.
Right. We have parable, Middle English, from Greek parabole, placing side by side. A parable puts a simple story side by side with a moral principle for comparison.
Makes sense. Paradox.
Mid-16th century. Statement contrary to accepted opinion. From Greek, para distinct from, and doxa opinion, an idea distinct from common sense.
Parallel.
Mid-16th century again. Greek para alongside and alelos one another, lines running alongside each other.
Paranoia.
Early 19th century, Greek para irregular or amiss and nous mind. Literally, a mind that is amiss, maybe beside oneself with mind. Mental irregularity.
Parasite. Sounds like besides.
It is. Mid-16th century, from Greek parasitos, person eating at another's table, from para alongside and sitos food, someone eating alongside another at their expense. The biological sense came later, early 18th century.
And perish.
Middle English, from Greek parakia, sojourning or dwelling nearby, based on para beside subsidiary and oikos dwelling. Originally an ecclesiastical area, a community subsidiary to or beside a central church.
Okay, those all fit the beside or beyond pattern. Now for para two, the protecting from one.
Much simpler, maybe more obvious once you know the root. Think parachute.
Ah, protects from falling.
Exactly. Late 18th century, from French protection against and shoot fall. Literally protection against falling.
And parasol.
Protects from the sun. Early 17th century, from French via Italian parasol. Para protecting against and sol sun. Literally protection against the sun.
It's amazing how two identical prefixes can come from different languages and mean totally different things.
Isn't it? It really demonstrates how crucial context and the root language are for understanding a word's history. You really need to know which para you're looking at. Underscores the complex, sometimes messy evolution of language.
Okay, let's move to the other prefix, pro. This one feels more straightforward, maybe. Often means forward, forth, before.
Generally, yes, or sometimes completely or on behalf of. It's often about movement or position forward in time or space or having a purpose. And its influence is huge. Shapes countless words about action, creation, projection.
Like produce.
Exactly. Late Middle English, from Latin producer to lead forth. Pro forward, plus ducere to lead. Early sense was provide for consideration, like producing evidence, bringing it forward.
And the meaning of farm produce.
Came much later, late 17th century, referring to what the land brings forth, still that forward idea.
How about project?
Also late Middle English, from Latin projectum, something prominent or thrown forward, from procere to throw forth.
So projecting an image or a project plan, it's throwing something forward.
Literally or figuratively, yes. Early verb senses were plan, devise, throwing an idea forward, and cause to move forward, like a projectile.
And prohibit seems like the opposite of forward.
Kind of. Late Middle English, from Latin prohiber, to keep in check or hold back. It's pro in front, plus haber, to hold. The idea is holding something back, keeping it in front of a barrier, stopping it moving forward.
Ah, so it uses pro in front to mean stopping progress. Clever. And this gave us prohibition.
The U.S. Prohibition era term, yes. Banning alcohol, holding back consumption nationwide. A big act of holding back.
Okay, other pro words showing this forward motion.
Loads, prolong. Late Middle English, from late Latin prolongare,
Hmm.
pro forward onward plus longus long, making something longer by extending it forward.
Prominent.
Late Middle English, from Latin prominere, jut out, first sense was projecting, jutting out, coming forward from a surface.
Okay.
Middle English, from Latin proponere, put forth, putting an idea forward.
Prose. Seems less about movement.
But Middle English, from Latin prosa, oratio, straightforward, discourse, from prosa's direct, so prose is direct writing, moving forward without poetry's twists.
And proverb.
Middle English, from Latin proverbium, pro forth plus verbum word, a saying put forth as a truth, passed forward.
Wow, so many pro words share that theme. Moving things forward. Ideas, objects, plans, wisdom.
It's a really powerful testament to that forward-thinking aspect of human communication, isn't it? All packed into this simple prefix, propelling things forward.
Let's wrap things up with a look some of the more playful or curious ways words change. Shortening, mishearing, copying sounds.
The linguistic oddities. These often show the messy, organic, wonderfully human side of language.
Totally. Let's start with P. Seems so simple. The little green vegetable.
Utterly commonplace. Yet its history involves a grammatical mistake, basically, that changed its form forever.
A mistake. What happened?
Well, from the mid-17th century, P is what linguists call a back formation. It came from an older word, peas.
Peas. Like peas porridge hot.
Exactly. But peas, originally from Old English pies, was actually singular, one peas.
It wasn't plural. It sounds plural.
It does, and that's what happens. Speakers incorrectly thought peas was plural, like cherries is the plural of cherry, which itself came from singular cherry as another back formation.
So they thought peas was plural and they wanted a singular.
So they chopped off the zez sound they thought was the plural ending, creating a brand new singular P.
That's brilliant. And as two peas in a pod reinforces that new singular mid-18th century.
Precisely. Cemented the mistake into correctness.
Speaking of back formations, chopping bits off words. Peeve, as in my pet peeve.
Right. The verb to peeve, meaning to annoy or irritate. It's relatively modern and spun off an older adjective.
Which was?
Peevish dates from late Middle English, meant foolish, mad, spiteful, irritable, kind of a grumpy word. Its own origin is unknown, annoyingly.
Huh. So how did peas come from peevish?
The verb peeve, to annoy, only shows up in the early 20th century. It's a clear back formation. People just removed what looked like a suffix, the ish, from peevish to make a new, punchier verb.
Another linguistic subtraction creating a new word, more direct.
It makes it more active, yeah.
Okay, from annoyance to the golf course. Putt.
The gentle tap into the hole.
How did that specific action get its own spelling, distinct from just putt?
Well, putt emerged mid-17th century, originally Scots mostly, for that light hit in golf. The key thing is the doubling of the T.
P-U-T-T.
It seems it was a deliberate spelling choice to differentiate it from the general verb put, to place something. Picture putt only meant the golf action.
A clever way to use spelling to signal a very specific meaning.
Subtle, but effective. Guides pronunciation and meaning instantly.
Now for one you flagged as hilarious. Plonk. For cheap wine.
Oh, plonk, yes. Informal British English from the 1930s for cheap, often nasty wine.
Where on earth did that come from?
Our sources say it was originally Australian usage, possibly brought back by soldiers after World War I. And the origin, get this, is probably an alteration or more accurately a mispronunciation of blanc. From the French phrase vin blanc, white wine.
No, they misheard or mispronounced Van Blanc so badly it became plonk.
That seems to be the most likely story. Imagine it. Fancy a drop of the old plonk instead of vin blanc. Consistent mispronunciation gives birth to a whole new word for cheap booze.
It's fantastic. Language taking the scenic, accidental route. Shows how informal organic change happens. A slip of the tongue becomes permanent.
Exactly. Love that one.
From bad wine to bad behavior. Peeping Tom. Conjures an image right away.
Intrusive-looking illicit surveillance, right? But the story behind it is pure folklore.
Okay, tell us. The word peep itself means looking quickly, furtively.
Yeah. Peep is late 15th century, symbolic of that quick, secret look, often through a small gap. But Peeping Tom comes from the name of the only guy said to have watched Lady Godiva ride naked through Coventry.
The Lady Godiva legend, 13th century. She protested taxes.
That's the one. Rode naked as a protest against her husband Leofric's heavy taxes. In later versions of the story, everyone in town respectfully looked away, except one guy,
Tom.
Tom the tailor, usually. He peeped, and supposedly he was struck blind as punishment for his voyeurism.
Wow. So a local legend, a cautionary tale, becomes embedded in everyday language as a term for a voyeur.
Isn't it wonderful? Shows how folklore, shared stories, moral lessons become part of the common lexicon, a cultural touchstone born from a legend.
And finally, a pair of words that sound the same but mean different things, yet have a surprising connection. Patter.
Right, patter like rain and patter like fast talk. Homonyms but linked.
Okay, patter 1, the sound, raindrops, footsteps.
That sense is early 17th century. It's a frequentative verb, implies repeated action. Pat, pat, pat. Often seen as imitative, onomatopoeic. Captures the sound.
Makes sense. Then patter 2, the smooth, fast talk, sales patter, comedian's patter.
This sense is older, late Middle English, and it first meant to recite a prayer, charm, etc., rapidly and often mechanically.
Reciting prayers rapidly, how does that connect?
Here's the amazing link. It comes from Paternoster.
Our Father, the Lord's Prayer.
Literally, Our Father, yes. The prayer was traditionally recited rapidly, often by rote, in Latin, so that rapid may be automatic recitation of a prayer.
Evolved into the idea of any rapid rehearsed speech, like sales patter.
Exactly. The noun sales patter emerged mid-18th century from that idea. And the phrase pitter-patter, that's just a playful reduplication and echo of the verb patter.
So the sound of rain and a salesman's pitch share a distant ancestor in the rapid recitation of the Lord's Prayer.
Who knew the divine could be so chatty? Or that prayer rhythms could inspire sales techniques? A truly unexpected connection showing how sound and performance shape language.
And just to wrap up this fun section, the term portmanteau word itself.
Ah, a word about words.
The word portmanteau itself means a traveling bag, right? Mid-16th century. From French portmanteau, carry mantle.
A suitcase that opens into two halves, often.
But portmanteau word, blending two words like motel, motor plus hotel, or smog, smoke plus fog, that was coined much later.
Famously coined, yes, by Lewis Carroll in Through the Looking Glass, 1872. He needed a word to describe these blended words his characters used.
And he chose the name of a two-part suitcase. Perfect analogy for a word made of two parts.
Captures that playful, inventive spirit of language beautifully.
And just quickly, you mentioned apple and feather in the outline too. Not dramatic origins, but significant.
Right. Straightforward etymologies, Old English apple for fruit, feather for plume. But their importance lies in how they became root words for so many other terms.
Through metaphor.
Often, yes. Apple became generic for fruit, leading to pineapple. Looks like a pine cone, not an apple. Feather gave us featherweight, or light as a feather. Basic objects creating fundamental analogies for understanding weight, shape, etc. Simple building blocks for complex description.
And there we have it. A whirlwind, but hopefully illuminating, tour through the linguistic landscape of P-words.
Quite the journey.
From ancient Greek gods causing panic, to the humble pantry just for bread, and that incredible upgrade of a penthouse, from outhouse to luxury pad, language really is alive, isn't it?
Living, breathing, constantly evolving, each word packed with centuries of human history, ingenious adaptations, sometimes delightful irony.
Indeed. And what's so profound is how each word carries these layers, sometimes conflicting layers, of history, reflecting huge cultural shifts, surprising transformations.
It really encourages you to think more critically, more inquisitively about the words we use every day, doesn't it?
Yeah, forces you to ask why we say what we say, how these simple words can be so packed with meaning, revealing old assumptions, forgotten contexts.
They're not just labels. They're rich, dynamic artifacts of human civilization. History in miniature.
So next time you use a word from our P list today, or any word, really maybe take a second, imagine its journey. Think about how passive once literally meant exposed to suffering. A very different view of vulnerability than we have now.
Right.
Or how pretty, for centuries, was actually linked to trickery or cunning, not just beauty. Shows how drastically perceptions change.
Language is this amazing organic system, constantly evolving, shedding old meanings, adopting new ones, often without us even noticing the quiet revolution happening.
It's so true, which raises a big question, doesn't it? If our words are always changing, always shifting, what does that mean for how we understand history itself?
That's the core of it. And how will future generations understand our language today with all its slang and nuances? It's this vast, ongoing continuum of meaning, a constant deep dive into itself.
Every conversation, every book, every tweet contributes to this endless linguistic evolution.
Constantly shaping and reshaping our tools for thought.
So, what stands out most to you, our listener, from today's deep dive? What other words do you suspect hold fascinating hidden histories just waiting to be uncovered?
Keep listening, keep asking questions.
And keep digging into the incredible living stories our language has to tell. It's a journey that truly never ends.